This is gonna get messy. Hello everyone, my name is Dalton and welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the worst books that I read in 2021. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't love any of these books, but I didn't hate any of them by any means. So honestly, some of these are just my most disappointing reads. They had a lot of hype and I just didn't end up liking them. So I was disappointed in them. Before I begin, huge disclaimer, these books did not work for me for one reason or another. That doesn't mean that they didn't work for some of you. If you love these books, I'm so glad that you love them. I wish I loved them. But for whatever reason, they just didn't end up working for me. They're my opinion. Don't get mad at me in the comments. If you do, try to be nice about it. Let me know if you did like some of these books. What did you like about them? I'm dying to know. But without further ado, let's get into my worst books of 2021. The first book that I'm going to talk about today is The Underground Railroad by Colson Whitehead. I believe I ended up giving this book 2.5 stars. So I just had a lot of issues with this book. Before I get into those though, I just didn't really love this book. It's a retelling of the Underground Railroad where the actual Underground Railroad is working locomotives that transport escaped slaves throughout the country. And it's not that I didn't like that, because it's a really cool concept, and honestly I think Whitehead executed it pretty well. The only issues that I had were the novel broke off from the main character and there were multiple different points of view. And I just didn't feel like those points of view added anything to the story or gave the main character any information. They all ended up crossing paths at some point. But honestly, the information that we were getting from these side characters, I don't think was interesting enough to benefit the actual story. And on top of that, I kind of felt that Cora, the main character, was a little underwhelming and flat. And honestly, I just wish that Whitehead, instead of spending time with all these side characters, would have just spent more time dealing with the main character. So that's basically why I didn't like it. Like I said, I really did find the concept with locomotives transporting escaped slaves back and forth across the country. I really did find that incredibly interesting, and I thought Whitehead's writing and descriptions of everything was super great. I mean, he's a brilliant writer. But overall, the story just didn't work for me. The next book that I want to talk about today is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb. I was so disappointed when I read this book because I feel like I've heard nothing but great things. It's on so many best fantasy of all time lists, and it was just kind of meh for me. I think I ended up giving it 2.5 stars or 2 stars like the last book, honestly. And in this book, we follow Fitz, who is a bastard to the throne of the Kingdom of the Six Duchies. And his life is just honestly miserable. He gets crap from literally everybody except for one person. And it's just hard to read because everybody in this novel hates him and he's so depressed. And it's hard to get through, honestly. But we're following Fitz as he's training to become an assassin. And I don't know why, but this is the most boring book following an assassin I've probably ever read. I feel like everything that he's actually learning and all the techniques and stuff that could actually be cool and make the story go fast and be interesting, I feel like Hobb just kind of skips over it and gleams over things, and we don't really get to see any of his assassin work in action, I guess. I will say I do find the world really fleshed out, and that the world was really cool. There's also 2 magic systems, one of which I thought was really interesting that I've never really thought of before. The other one was a little convoluted, and I hope she fleshes it out a little bit more as the series goes on. But yeah, honestly, I was really disappointed in this. I'm still going to go ahead and read and continue on in the series because I own all the pretty copies, not going to lie. But I hope the next one's a lot better. But yeah, that's how I felt about Assassin's Apprentice, unfortunately. The next book that I want to talk about, I've already mentioned on this channel before, and that is Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo. I picked this book up because one of my coworkers recommended it, plus this show came out, so it was super hyped at the beginning of the year. So I picked it up, and honestly, had I read it like 8 years ago, I would have loved it. You know what I mean? But it was just, now that I'm older and I've read so many different things, I just found it to be so incredibly cliche and filled with tropes. But basically, if you don't know, you follow Elena as she finds out she has magical powers that are different than anybody else's. And then she gets like taken to this magical school, which I will say, in the Grisha world, the different magic systems that Leigh Bardugo has put in place are super interesting. Like, I'll give her credit for those. But Elena was just like such a flat character for me. She was just filled with tropes. She's not like other girls. She goes on her own hero's journey, but she's different than everybody else. There's obviously a love triangle. The ending was okay. I found the ending to be okay. I did care more throughout the series because I did also finish the rest of the series this year. So it did get better. I didn't love the last book, but the second book I thought was so much better than the first one. But unfortunately, I did not like the first one. But yeah. The next book that I want to talk about is Now You're One of Us. I don't remember the author's name, and I cannot find my copy of this book anywhere, so I'll just throw a picture up on the screen. My significant other seen this book on TikTok, so we bought copies and read it together. And it's supposed to be like this horror, thriller, suspense novel. Basically, this girl marries into a family and slowly finds out all these secrets about them and thinks that they've murdered somebody. And it's just, in theory, it was a great novel. Like, just going based off that premise. However, then the author just does very weird stuff where like the family is just continuously drugging this poor narrator, not telling her anything. And then like the actual twist at the end was just terrible. I'm not going to spoil it or anything like that, but this is my least favorite book that I've read this year. I gave this book 1 star. It was terrible. And I've read other books where this twist actually does work. It's just this one did not, because it just was awful. It was awful. Don't read it. And if you do, tell me if you liked it, because I don't know how. Explain why you liked it. The next book that I'm going to talk about is a bit controversial because here on YouTube and Book Talk and that sort of stuff, it is quite beloved. But that is Cemetery Boys by Aiden Thomas, maybe? I don't remember who the author is. Like, again, I'll throw a picture up on the screen. I don't like YA. That's where I'm going to start with this. And I can read certain YA, like I read all of Shadow and Bone. I can read certain YA if it isn't super, super young feeling. And for this book, I felt like this wasn't even YA. It was like middle grade. It was so young. I did not like the main character whatsoever. I just found them to be whiny. I didn't like the romance at all. What little bit there was like a mystery in this that I felt was so unnecessary. And it's so sad. I really wish I would have loved this book because, again, my significant other read it and they loved it, so I was really looking forward to it. So I guess I was just kind of disappointed. And not only that, it's following a young trans boy as he's coming into like his identity and trying to understand himself and that sort of stuff. So like the topic is so great and I want to see more books like this. I just really did not like it at all, and I feel bad because I wish I did, because it's got such good representation and that sort of stuff, but I just found it so bad. I'm sorry. This is probably like the second worst book that I read this year. I think I gave it 2 stars. It really did not work for me. Oops. And the next book that I really did not like is Wicked by Gregory Maguire. Again, my significant other really likes this book. Maybe I should stop taking their recommendations because I never end up actually enjoying their books or their favorite books. This, I think, is the case that I went into this with certain expectations that just were not met at all. It's about the Wicked Witch of the West from Oz, from The Wizard of Oz. And I guess I was going into this book thinking this was going to chronicle the Wicked Witch as she became wicked. Like, what made her become wicked, like all the terrible things she was going to do. I thought this would be great. Here is a story where Gregory Maguire is trying to humanize the Wicked Witch of the West and make her, like, not necessarily a relatable character, but a character that you technically, like, feel bad for because she's gone through, like, really crappy things in her life. And while he does do that, I also, like, just wanted more. Like, I just felt like by the end of this book, all I did was feel bad for her, and that's not what I wanted when I read a book about the Wicked Witch of the West. I wanted to hate her, not feel bad for her. I guess, like I said, I guess I went into this with expectations that I didn't realize I had before going into this, and I just didn't get what I want. The writing and everything was okay. Like, nothing was bad about this book. I know a lot of people love this book, but I just really did not because of the certain expectations that I guess that I had. But yeah, really, I'm not going to read anything else by him because if he's humanizing like all these characters that I don't want to be humanized, I just don't want that. It's not my type of book, I guess. The next book is also going to be quite controversial, and that is Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. I gave this book 3 stars, and the only reason I gave it 3 stars is because the writing in this novel is absolutely fantastic. This, besides Beloved, is probably the best written novel that I've read all year. This book was so wonderfully written, but I hated all the characters in this novel. I don't think I liked a single one of them. I don't know what it is. So we're basically following this swamp girl as she grows up by herself after all of her family leaves her in North Carolina, in like a swamp. Basically, she learns to survive on her own. She ends up becoming like this crazy popular marine biologist who like specializes in her field. There's like a murder mystery going on, so like at first it is kind of interesting, but I just did not like the characters, so nothing propelled me through this novel besides the writing. I don't know. I really didn't love this novel. It just didn't work for me. Like I said, I didn't like any of the characters. The writing is beautiful. I say you should read this novel just for the writing itself, but like honestly, it just didn't work for me. So yeah, I didn't love this. Now this book was bad, and that is The Body by Stephen King. And it's not even like a book, it's kind of like a novella. I don't even think it's like 200 pages long. Stephen King, I've read quite a few of his books now. Stephen King cannot write any other main character besides himself at different stages in their life. We're following a kid who likes to tell stories. He's nerdy, blah, 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 blah. I'm just so over reading the same character from Stephen King's work. We got this perspective in It. We got this perspective in Misery. Like, I just can't. He needs to write different characters. Like, you cannot just keep writing the same person over and over again, just in a different stage of adulthood or childhood. Like, I can't do it anymore. This was just so bad. And, like, the actual book itself, besides the main character, is not bad because they're discovering a body. Like, everything that goes along with finding a dead body. I mean, there's a lot of trauma and stuff that could go along with finding a dead body with a group of friends one summer. But, like, we didn't talk about any of that. He didn't go into any of that. It was so strange. The next couple books that I'm going to talk about are just incredibly disappointing books. The other ones on this list, my worst ones, they obviously disappointed me in some certain way, but like these ones I wouldn't even say were like the worst books that I read, just like the most disappointing this year. So I found these books the most disappointing out of all of these books on this list, whether it was because they were hyped or whatever. The first book actually took me by surprise, and that is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin. That's the first book in this Inheritance trilogy. So I have read the fifth season and her most popular novel, or her most recent novel, The City We Became, which are both so good. I gave the fifth season 4 stars, and I gave The City We Became 5 stars. So I picked this up, and this is her first, at least the first book in this series, is her first published work. And I wish I would have started here, because it was just disappointing, because I don't think her writing was as good as it has been in like the other 2 works that I've read by her. And the world building wasn't as good, the main character was kind of meh. It was disappointing, because I have like ideas of what N.K. Jemisin can do, because I've read The City We Became in the 5th season, which are great. It just disappointed me. It wasn't bad. If you're gonna start N.K. Jemisin, start here, because I think it only gets better. I actually just finished the second book, The Broken Kingdoms, and even that was way better than the first book in my opinion. So I think if you're gonna start reading N.K. Jemisin, start here, start with the first book. It's the most disappointing. It's good, but it will disappoint you if you come back to it and read it after you've read some of her other work. The next book that really disappointed me is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is her first adult work, and I just really was not a huge fan of it. The writing in this is pretty good. I think this is probably her best writing. However, I just wasn't in love with the main character and like the story. Her world building and like descriptions of Yale, because this takes place at Yale's campus, was super interesting. But basically we follow this girl, I think her name's like Star or something like that. Oh, Galaxy Alex Stern. It's Alex. We follow her as she gets accepted into Yale because she can see ghosts. And like the whole world and the fantasy of that kind of opens up. There's like secret societies at Yale that do different things with like paranormal stuff. Overall, I just really didn't love where the story was going. I was super excited to read this because it's her first adult work. But like honestly, I felt that it was kind of YA, and I understand the characters are in college, so they're not technically like young adults. It just didn't really work for me. It didn't read as adult to me. I mean, there are some graphic things in here that would put it in categorize it as adult, but like even then, like I thought it to be like a little bit YA-ish, and I wasn't a huge fan. Oh boy, another Stephen King book. Misery was a misery to get through. I have heard nothing but great things about the movie, and I still haven't watched it. I would love to. But like there's just so much going on in this novel that doesn't actually need to be going on. You're following a writer who gets in a car crash and then ends up in some stranger's house who ends up taking care of him. She turns out to be his #1 biggest fan, but she's like insane and like abuses him, drugs him, does all this horrible stuff to him, including making him rewrite one of his series finales. Like in this book, we read some of that book, and like it's just so unnecessary in my opinion. I don't know. I didn't love this novel. I think I ended up giving it 3 stars. It wasn't great. Disappointed the hell out of me. Stephen King, I really don't know where to stand with him, because there are some books that I've read. I read The Stand, and that was one of my favorite books of the year. Then I read this and The Body, and both of them disappointed me, and I didn't love either one of them. I just don't know where to stand. Like, should I continue reading him? Should I give up on him? Who knows? We'll see what happens. But that is all for today, guys. Those are the worst books, or most of it. I shouldn't even say worst books, because like I didn't hate any of them except for like 1 or 2. So like honestly, these are just like my most disappointing books of the year. Leave me some books in the comments that you didn't end up liking this year. Like I said, chit chat with me. If you did like them, tell me why. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace out. Bye.